Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unfulfilled podcast, where we dive into all about what it's really like navigating through our 20s. Whether you want to feel less alone in all that you're experiencing, or looking for advice on how to grow and be your best self, or feel more fulfilled in your everyday life, Unfulfilled is the place for you. Today, I am so excited to have Jennifer Lee Corin on the podcast. Jennifer is both a therapist and an author. She wrote a book called I Love Me More. I have it right here if you're watching on video, or if you're not, I'm holding up this beautiful book. It's I Love Me More Lessons from a 20 something Therapist. I Love Me More is a book on life post college, self acceptance, imperfect permanence, and transitional 20s and 30s. So I read this book right when I moved to New York City about a year and a half ago. And when I did, as I was just telling her offline, I knew that I had to connect with Jennifer. I was so eager to just sit down with her, have coffee, and here I am having her on my podcast, which is so much better because this book was so impactful and inspiring, given that it just offers such relatable and practical ways to help us all navigate through transitions in life. In this book, she offers a unique perspective both from her experience as well as what she's learned from working with her clients to help them in their journeys as a therapist. So I know that I'm not the only one that will find this book very impactful and inspiring. So I'm excited for you all to hear more about it and hopefully read it yourself. So, with that being said, Jennifer, welcome to the Unfulfilled podcast. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to dive in and thanks for that awesome intro.
Oh, of course. So, to get started, I would love if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So, as Camille said, my name is Jennifer, and I am a psychotherapist living in Chicago with my fiance, and I'm currently in private practice. And I wrote the book "I Love Me More," a book on life transitions throughout the turbulent 20s and 30s. And yes, it specifies 20s and 30s, but it can truly, I think, apply to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. I've had a lot of people reach out to me from all different life stages saying that they found some meaning in it. And I wrote the book, I released the book about 2 years ago, which is pretty wild because time has flown by. And it really came from a place of wanting people to feel less alone on this journey that we call the 20s and 30s, because there are so many rapid life changes happening all at once. And I found in my own journey, I never really had the resources, I think, that really combined therapy plus somebody's life experience to help guide me through hard times of change. So as a practicing therapist and also somebody who was going through it at the same time, I was able to kind of combine my life story in addition to my clients' life stories, in addition to my psychoeducation on therapeutic modalities, all into one book to help anyone going through change, anyone going through transitions feel like they have a tool. And I think first and foremost, an accessible tool, because therapy can sometimes not be accessible. And so this was really a passion project plus creative endeavor for me, truly.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you do such a beautiful job of that, of combining your professional take as a therapist as well as incorporating your own experience. It really, I found, provided such a relatable perspective. And I think it definitely just deepens the connections between you and your readers.
Thank you.
So I do want to acknowledge that you wrote this book while you were in your 20s, which I think is so amazing and inspiring because you see so many authors hold off to wait a book until they're experienced and like in their later 30s or 40s or 50s or whatnot.
Yeah.
So, what was the biggest factor that led you to writing this book? And how did you find that courage and confidence within at such a young age to do so?
No, it's such a great question. I mean, I think that at the time, I remember when I graduated college, I felt really alone. I felt like there was a lot of literature, but it was coming from probably like an older generation, and it was coming from there was a generational gap within literature. I also felt like the literature out there at the time wasn't inclusive and it wasn't incorporating a variety of experiences, a variety of perspectives. And so, and again, I think like within our generation, within the millennials, within the Gen Z, the Gen X, it's very, very different. Life is very different right now. I mean,
Mhm.
specifically social media. It's just it's hard to find, I think, the older literature relatable and connecting. So I felt like I had gone through kind of my own life changes and transitions, and then I got into the room as a therapist and recognized that all my clients were going through very, very similar themes that I was going through and also had gone through. And combining, I think, my education as a psychotherapist and the tools that I know are extremely helpful for my clients in therapy. I was like, we're going to write this in real time. So I didn't know I was really writing a book. I started when I was probably 22, just writing journal entries, struggling in New York City.
Yeah.
And as you read through the book, you can probably see that the language gets deeper, that the author gets older. Because it was in real time as I was writing throughout my 20s. It was this angsty person just trying to find themselves and their place. And this is the I would say self-disclosure parts of my book. So and then as I got older, really figuring out, okay, these are the tools that I'm supposed to be using to find who I am and what I need and what's helpful. And so that's really my part of the book, but really the majority of the book is sort of just this four staged theory I created, and it's called the caterpillar to butterfly effect. And I don't know if you want to get into that
Yes, yes. It
right
is on my list, so let's dive into that. So, would love for you to unpack the caterpillar butterfly effect for us.
Yeah. So again, I think my book is, and I'm kind of all over the place, but it's a mixture between my own experiences, my clients' experiences, and all of that is just woven through the book. But the main structure of the book is surrounding this. And as we know with caterpillars that turn into butterflies, they go through rapid amounts of change to start to fly and spread their wings. And that was really where I came up with the terminology. But really, what it is it's about finding yourself in order to spread your wings and move on to the next life stage or the next journey or the next change that you're going through. So I created this four-stage theory, and as a therapist, there's there is a plethora of modalities and theories that we use in the room with clients. As my clients know, I don't use a one size fits all approach. I'm pretty eclectic, I'm pretty existential. I figure out what my client needs, and then I take my experience and I use it in the room, whether it's a tool, whether it's just I'm talking to them and guiding them. And so this theory combined a lot of this four-stage theory I created combined a ton of therapeutic modalities and just condensed it into four stages. And the four stages are shedding is stage one. Stage two is collecting information and processing. Stage three is radical acceptance. And stage four is making a decision. And what does all of this mean? It's there are four stages to help you through change. So no matter what you're going through, amidst the unknown, amidst the chaos of life, we can read this book, we can open these stages, and it can take us through finding ourselves. And there are journaling prompts. Stage one is really about who you're not and what isn't working to help you discover who you are, which kind of pulls from acceptance and commitment therapy as a therapist. And it asks you a bunch of questions. And then to help you really understand the stages, I use my own life experience and then I use my clients' experiences to kind of help you guide you through this book. Overall, really what I'm saying, and I think to get to the gist of it, is that anxiety is something that's a really big theme in the room with my clients. And when we break down anxiety, it's excessive fear and worry over the future and over the past. It's never really rooted in the present, right? And so all of my clients are struggling with some form of anxiety in their lives. And this is a tool that is helping you to make peace with your now. It's a tool that brings you back to the present so that amidst whatever chaos, whatever anxiety you're going through during this unstructured 2-decade period of your life,
Yeah.
we know that we can come back to this and it's going to help ground us in where we are with who we are right now. And it's going to help us find peace with our now knowing that, oh, I've gone through the caterpillar to butterfly effect. I know my values. I know who I am. I know what my needs are. I know that constantly changing is okay. So that every time I start to fear, oh my God, am I not in the right place? Am I not at the right time? Is this person that I'm dating not right for me? We get to go back to the work that we've done in this 4-stage theory and say, no, I'm right where I need to be. It's okay to evolve. It's okay for rapid amounts of change to happen. I can go back to this tool. And so this is a tool that helps you make peace with your now. It's not a tool that's like, oh, I'm going to find all the knowns and the answers to life.
Right.
No, that's part of the process. That's part of the healing. That's part of our journeys. It's just a tool that helps you to feel less alone and to understand how to guide yourself through this really uncomfortable period of time.
Absolutely. And I think my favorite part about it is normalizing this phase of transition because, as you said, whether in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we're always going through some sort of transition. And coming to this 4-stage strategy reminds us that, okay, we can accept that we're not feeling perfectly happy or comfortable or settled right now because we're in stage 2 or we're in stage 3 or we're in the shedding stage 1. And ex- and using this strategy and using these 4 stages helps us to, as you said, accept where we're at and let go of needing to have all the answers or needing to feel 100% certain. So I
Absolutely.
think that's what's been most impactful for me is embracing wholeheartedly the feeling of this transition and using this as a guide going through it.
Mm-hmm.
So stage 1 you just addressed is shedding. And also that's my favorite stage because I think in any aspect of life, figuring out who you are and figuring out what's meant for you means figuring out what's not for you, right? Whether it be going through the bad careers, letting go of the friendships that aren't meant for us anymore. We have to shed those things. So,
Mm-hmm.
love that one. What's stage 2?
Yeah, so stage, and just to like reiterate what you said, it I used a lot of values based work in there. So if you're not familiar with your values or what that means, we do a lot of values work in therapy and identifying yourself. And so you go through stage 1 and you're like, okay, things aren't feeling right. Like usually if you're going to come into a period of change in your life, like things aren't feeling right for me.
Yeah.
And so stage 1 is like, okay, what isn't feeling right? What isn't working? And then you can make a list. What isn't working? And then what is? And then based on what is, what are your values? How do you identify with those? How are you relating to those? What are they? Right? We can say, oh, I value family, but how active are you in engaging with family? Like what does that actually mean? Or I value my friends. I at least, as you said, if you're letting a friend go, it's like, oh, I value, but if they're not prioritizing you and they're not relating to you in a consistent way, maybe they're not really valuing you, right? So understanding what is a value and how I'm relating to it and what I'm needing and what isn't working to understand what is. And then we pivot into this stage called you in context. So it's really you and your environment. And what I want for my clients there is after you've gone through shedding, who you're not for who you are, it's really about collecting the information that you've had and sitting with it. We never sit with our feelings. Every single one of my clients can tell you that I'm like, all right, sit with that, feel that. What does that feel like? And they're like,
They like panic.
go. And I have this rapport with a lot of those, and they're like, fuck you. All right. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can say that on the podcast.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Happy you bleep me out. And I'm like, okay, we're gonna sit there. And they're like, I'm so uncomfortable. And I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. What's
Yeah.
happening right now with you? We never sit with our feelings. We don't want to do it. We distract ourselves. We engage in scrolling. We engage in social media. We engage in, being with friends, always surrounding ourselves so that we
Avoiding
don't
being alone. Yeah.
avoiding being alone. So stage 2 is really about figuring out what you've discovered, whatever that is, right? Let's say you're in a relationship and it's not working and you're not feeling good. Stage 1, shedding, what isn't working? In discovering what isn't working, what do you want in a relationship? What's going to work for you? Stage 2, sit with that, process that. How does that feel? How does that feel sitting with what you've just discovered about yourself? And then we go into stage 3 And I took this term. It's called radical acceptance. It is from dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a therapeutic modality that we use for anyone who's feeling dysregulated, or just for, kind of helping somebody to have some emotional homeostasis and any of that. If you've many people have heard of it if they're in therapy and they're needing help with emotional regulation. But it's a term, and I took it out of context, and it's called radical acceptance. And it's fully accepting what you've learned in stage 1 and stage 2. A lot of the times we're in conflict or we're in dissonance because we are unwilling to accept what we've learned about ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
or what we know our hearts are screaming at us, or what we know our brains are screaming at us. And so, stage 1 is the self discovery. Stage 2 is the collection and processing. And in stage 2, we can also say, okay, so let's say I know I don't like drinking, and I know I really value my health, but I don't know what that means for me. Stage 2 is collecting and processing it. I did this with a client about a year and a half ago. They were toying with sober living, totally
Mm-hmm.
sober living. That no addiction, nothing, but just they wanted to be completely sober.
Yeah.
And so stage 2 was, okay, if I go out and I have a drink, one drink, is that going to lead me to a second? How did that feel for me? Okay, I'm going to come back, I'm going to journal about that. Okay, that didn't feel good. What about half of a drink? Okay, didn't feel good at all. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so now I'm collecting and processing. Now I've processed that drinking isn't right for me. Stage 3, radical acceptance. I've accepted what I've discovered about myself. And stage 4 is now I'm making a decision to, at this time in my life, live soberly. And that might change, and
Mm-hmm.
permission to change my mind at any point. And so I always say to someone, if you've accepted, right, that the relationship isn't right for you, let's say a romantic relationship, and and you get to stage 4 and you can't break up with them. I have a client I'm working with right now. I can't break up with them. I can't. Okay, then let's make a decision to not break up with them. We know they're not right, but we're deciding to stay in this. They might not be ready. Then we put it aside. We can always come back to it, and we can go through the caterpillar to butterfly effect again. It's a way of making peace with your now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for diving into all of that. I think it's so incredibly powerful for anything we're going through, like you said. And I love what you just noted about that client going through that relationship. I think it's important to acknowledge that going through all four phases isn't going to happen overnight, and it could take a long time. And I think that's such a beautiful thing you acknowledge that maybe you're not ready to make that decision or pull the trigger just yet. Like, whether it be sober living, whether it be ending a relationship, moving
Mm-hmm.
cities, whatever it is, whatever transition, you can know that you're heading in that direction, but maybe not like feel ready to do it yet. But that's okay. And I think that's where like self compassion comes into play too. It's like working your way there. It's like we hope that your client like will eventually end the relationship. Like we know it will happen, but it's like might not be today, you know?
Yes, and I think the thing is we're all looking for validation as to where we're at. So
Hmm.
the thing is when we can say, well, I'm in stage 2, I'm just collecting and processing it. I'm like, you're in stage 2. That's a
Yeah. You're not
that's
at
a
four yet.
win. Yeah, that's a win. But
Yeah.
even if you were at 4 and you made the decision that you're going to stay in it,
Hmm.
you made that decision.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's stay there. Let's let it be. Let's let it be in stage 4. So even to label sometimes where we're at provides so much power for someone to say, I am in stage 4. I've made a decision. I am not ready, but at least I've come to terms with that. I'm not ready, right? And as a therapist, I juggle between pushing a little for change and accepting where we're at,
Right.
and then also giving my client really the agency to say, you'll know when you're ready, and I'm going to be here with you to support you before, during, and after. So I think ultimately, right, why we all are struggling is we cannot stand not knowing. We can't stand not having a structure to an unstructured period of time. We can't stand being uncomfortable. And there's something about this four-stage theory that brings a lot of comfort to a very uncomfortable period of change. To label, to say, this is what I'm in. I've done the self discovery. I know this about myself. And I've found a lot of my clients have found empowerment through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And perfect transition into in working with your clients, you noted that one of the biggest things that they struggle with is this idea of the imperfection in these stages, accepting that in a transition phase, things are not going to look perfect. So, would love to talk a little bit about that and for you to address this idea of embracing imperfection, letting go of what we thought our lives would look like and accepting what it does actually look like.
Absolutely. I think that's the hardest part of the 20s and the 30s. And something I've found is who you thought you were going to be close to. Or right, I don't know if you've ever touched on should statements in your
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So there are no shoulds. There actually are three shoulds. This is what I say to my clients. There are, have you touched on that?
No, I would love to hear.
Okay. You guys are getting a mini therapy session here.
Perfect.
There are three shoulds in life, right? The moral should is I shouldn't punch someone in the face. The universal should, which is the fact if I drop my phone, it should drop,
Mm.
right?
Yep.
And the law shoulds, which is I shouldn't drink and drive. And if it's not one of those shoulds, moral, universal, or the law, you should not be saying it. And so
Yeah.
to go back to your question, I think that gosh, imperfection is such a hard part of the 20s. I think that we believe things should look the way that we want them to, that as I said, you're going to have you should have these friends in your life, you should be engaged or married by this time, you should have babies by 30. It's a huge thing that I hear all the time. You should have this many eggs if you freeze your eggs compared to your friends. I should know what I want to do for the rest of my life and I should be good at it. I should buy a place. I should. I hear it all the time. It's so it's so heavy and it's so mean. And it comes from the way we were raised. It comes from the shows we watched when we were kids. It comes from social media. And I think it's really important to recognize everybody is on their own journey. Things are going to look really very different. Everything in life is going to be imperfect. Your job, your relationships, your friendships, your moods, your energies, your health. Your health is not going to be perfect. And if we can really accept that and lean into that, I think we can give ourselves a lot of love and empathy and understanding. And the comparison effect comes into play huge with that because we compare our lives naturally to the people around us. And if we are, quote, behind in our friendship circles or with the people we follow on social media, I think it can really lead to a lot of cognitive distortions, which is a should statement. We want to really be mindful of that and really, I think, putting our blinders on and going back to the caterpillar to butterfly effect and saying, what are my values? What am I needing? Am I living a values-based, meaningful life? Recognizing I'm not going to have everything at once, all at once, and it's not going to look perfect. And are you a Taylor Swift fan by
Yeah.
chance? Okay. Oh my God, her new album, amazing. Every time my client's like, I want to process her songs in therapy, I'm like, yes. Like,
Say
it's not about me, but like down.
you're like,
There's
I
a
didn't want to suggest this, but I'm so glad you did.
yeah, but I'm so glad you did. And we can go over just because of that. Yeah. But she says, and thank you, Amy, there wouldn't be this if there hadn't been you. And I really feel like all of your 20s and 30s are a culmination of ebbs and flows and imperfection leading you to where you're really supposed to be. And so
Yes.
when things aren't perfect, it's an opportunity to really get connected with yourself and love yourself and be like, yes, this is hard. This maybe I'm not in love with myself, but what can I start to learn more about me to get more comfortable with me and this really imperfect, uncomfortable transition of my life?
100%. I think it's in those times that are uncomfortable and quote imperfect. Those are the times when you grow, and that was a really big reason as to why I wanted to start this podcast is obviously to talk about the uncomfortable and difficult parts of our 20s, but in that there's so much growth that's happening, and I think that's so important to remember is that the imperfections that we're experiencing are good because it means that life is unraveling as it's meant to. And then going back to your should statements, if we're open to what naturally happens rather than clinging to those shoulds or clinging to those predetermined expectations or idea of what we thought our lives would look like,
Mm-hmm.
then we can be more open to what actually is meant for us, you know? So I think you made a great point in that the more that we compare, the more that we cling to those shoulds, the more imperfect our life is going to feel like. But if we
Yeah,
let go of those comparisons and expectations and shoulds, then our life doesn't seem imperfect. It just seems like it's working out as it's meant to, you know? So I think like a big part of it is mindset.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, I'll even give my clients like a word at the end of therapy, and I'll just be like, they'll be like, oh, I was struggling with this week. And again, we want something to cling on to. That's
Mhm.
really what it is. We don't want to feel like we're unraveling. So again, using therapeutic tools, using a word, a mantra, something to remind yourself you're right where you need to be, to
Yes.
remind yourself that presently I'm aligned, I'm okay, I am safe. We want to feel safe. It could be, I am leaning into the word open. Okay. It's such a basic word, but it's like, hey, this week I'm just going to be open. And I lean into that and I let go of anything that feels really closed, anything that feels tight, anything that feels stressful on my body, in my brain, in my community, in my circles. And if anything doesn't lean into that word, I'm not doing it or I'm not choosing it.
Yeah.
Um,
That almost isn't in alignment with the stage three, right? That radical acceptance. It's like, okay, how can we let go of what is no longer serving us, let go of what feels forced or is bringing us that anxiety and be open
mhm.
and like accept and like maybe like slow down and listen to what actually feels good within. Like
Yeah.
what what is our internal voice telling us and how can we like lean more into that direction?
Absolutely. Because I mean, even going back to like friendships, right? I mean, there's a lot of like, oh, I should be friends with this person because of our history,
Yeah.
because of this,
Oh
that,
gosh, I felt so much of that. Yeah.
this week. Yeah. It's, and when you were feeling that way, how did it make you feel to be in that relationship?
Honestly, just constant anxiety and it felt forced. It felt unreciprocated and letting go of certain friendships has felt so liberating, you know, but it's
Totally.
hard. It's also hard because it's like, how do you not take that personally, you know?
Well, there's grief with that too.
Yeah.
Like I almost sometimes feel like friendship breakups or just letting go of friends in general is harder than a romantic relationship.
Because it's like that gray area. It's not like, okay, now we're broken up. It's like a slow, painful, like fade.
Right. And we're slowly accepting that this person or something about this relationship dynamic isn't serving me. It's not making me feel good. And to come to
Mhm.
terms with that can feel very painful because once you come to terms with that, then there's almost something that tells you I should probably listen to that and make a decision on it, whether I want to tolerate this person from a distance
Mm.
or it's something that I'm consciously closing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard recently of this concept of inner circle versus outer circle. I'm reading this book called Worthy by Jamie Lee Kerma, and she talks about it in there. And your inner circle is people that you can 100% trust, 100% be yourself around. And then people in your outer circle, they might be these friends that you like want to distance from. And it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, I'm never going to see or talk to this person again. It's more like I'm accepting them and their friendship for what it is. And I'm
Yes.
no longer going to put added expectations or pressure onto it. So that's been a really helpful reframe for me lately is kind of like, what bucket is this person falling into? And it's helped in taking the pressure off, trying to make them something that they're not.
Absolutely. I something I tell my clients a lot about is like expect to accept. So, what expectations can we realistically have for this person? Sometimes it's none,
Yeah.
um, none whatsoever. And then, okay, and then we accept that. And then, it kind of helps with the disappointment or because, as you evolve and you age, and I think that this is a huge part of the 20s and 30s, everyone is you go through high school, you're at the same stage, you go through college at the same stage. When you get out of school, everyone becomes at different stages. You might have friends moving in with their partners right away. You might have friends getting pregnant. You might have friends getting married. You might have friends who are single and they are partying and living their best life. And sometimes like that relatability and that connection that you had in college or in high school, it dissipates. But something I've said to my clients is that you never know how things are going to fluctuate. So you could lose someone for a few years and then you get to be in the same life stage and they come back and it's better than ever.
Absolutely.
Or you just accept that we change and we evolve, and some people grow and move in different directions, but there's a lot of grief that comes with that too.
That's a great point. Just because someone might fall into one bucket is at one phase in life,
Mm-hmm.
they can always come back. And I think
Absolutely.
like coming full circle, it just comes back to staying open, right? It's like being open to the fact that like maybe they'll come back around and we'll be close again, maybe they won't. And again, applying the butterfly caterpillar effect to it's like acknowledging what needs to be shed and coming to terms with it and accepting it. So again, I
And
just think it could be applied to any aspect of life.
Absolutely. And especially with like friendships and relationships, there's something that we do oftentimes, which is that we question ourselves once we let somebody go. And and we get into this point where we're kind of bargaining. And bargaining is part of one of the stages of grief. So of
Mm-hmm.
course we're going to do that because we're grieving and we're sort of like, is this for me? Is this not for me? And something that can help, going back to, I think, the caterpillar to butterfly effect, is stage one is all about recognizing what isn't for you and why. It really breaks it all down and what your values are and what you need. And so when you want to go back to that ex-boyfriend, or you want to go back to that friend who has kind of been in an anxiously attached relationship with you, right? Maybe toxic, who knows? You go back to that stage one and you're like, oh, this is why I had to let this person go, or
Mm-hmm.
this is why I'm creating distance. And again, it's giving a known to an unknown. It's giving security to insecurity. It's giving validation to feeling off. Every time you're like, why did I do this? Because we do that when we
Mm-hmm.
feel lonely, when we feel anxious, when we're like looking back at old photos, we're like, I miss this person. It's like, no, Jennifer, let's go back. This is why you did this.
Yeah.
And we can really remind ourselves that we feel so connected to ourselves. We feel so connected to ourselves because we remind ourselves that we have the answers, that
Mm-hmm.
we've discovered this about ourselves. And I think when we question ourselves, or we're insecure, or we're anxious, we're in a disconnected state. So this tool also helps you to bring yourself back to connection. And that's what we need in this time. That's really hard.
Absolutely. Wow, that was so beautifully said. I'm just going to put a beautiful little bow on that conversation and move on to the next topic. I couldn't have said it better. So, in transitions as well, a common transition is letting go of one path we were on and
Mhm.
pivoting onto another path. So, you
Mhm.
in your book pivoted from your performing arts school, you made a big shift and you speak about this idea of letting go of that label that you once were clinging to, and
Mhm.
how also you had struggled with imposter syndrome in doing so. So I
Mhm.
would love for you to talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like growing up and being put in a ton of activities, we learn kind of our confidence through hobbies. And mine was singing, and mine was dancing and acting. And I always knew that I was really good at it, and not in an egotistical way, but just by the roles that I was getting, and the validation that you get, and et cetera, et cetera. And I write a lot about this in my book. I ended up auditioning for 25 conservatory programs my senior year of high school. And I was going to major in musical theater, and I ended up changing majors after my freshman year. I changed my major to my minor, and for a variety of reasons. Most of it had to do with the department and the some kind of interesting things going on behind the scenes that I don't need to get into on this podcast, that were swept under the rug, I think, by the university itself, and the people in the program know, obviously, and wonderful people that I was in a conservatory with. But it wasn't for me. So I ended up, I didn't want to, it was a letdown, because I auditioned, I got into this program, I was so excited, and then it didn't turn out to be what I wanted it to be for me, for my growth, for my education. I didn't want to change universities. I had a boyfriend at the time. I had, a group of friends. And so I ended up staying and I fell into psychology and I absolutely loved it. Um, and, I think going back to just like roles, I wasn't really active in theater for 3 years of school when I was there, but I continued with singing lessons. And my senior year of college, I auditioned for my first show ever, and I ended up getting the lead, which was really exciting. But I felt so much imposter syndrome around it, and I still feel that I do, although I think I've grown more acceptance and compassion around it. And there is imposter syndrome around, like, can I claim this role if I'm not active in it? And can I claim that I'm an actress or that I'm in musical theater if I'm not actively involved in it? And I know Alex Cooper actually once said on a podcast that she feels a lot of imposter syndrome around saying that she's an athlete. She was a college athlete that she talks about a lot, but she doesn't participate, I think, in sports anymore, yet still feels really connected to that college athlete role. And I think oftentimes if we're not actively engaging in a role, we feel like we can't call ourselves that role. But I think why we feel so much imposter syndrome and grief around feeling guilty or weird and separating ourselves from that role is because it holds so much more weight than just a label. I think the role defines relationships that you have, a language that you speak, passions you connect on, quirks that really only you and your community know about. So if we're not actively engaging in that role, for me, maybe it was actress for those 3 years, which is just really like acting is just a behavior, right? We feel like we almost can't call ourselves it. And I really believe that you can. And I think there's a part of me inside that will always just deeply be a theatrical theater person, whether I choose to be a therapist for the next year and then audition for a musical in Chicago, or I never audition for a show ever again, or I audition for one tomorrow and get the lead, like whatever it might be. I think it's accepting that, things are just constantly changing and evolving when you don't expect them to. And you can still engage in it however you want, even if you're not fully active in it. And I think, again, going back to just that sense of like, it's so much more than just a behavior. It's a personality, it's an identity, it's a language, it's a group of people you hang out with. And so I think there was like some grief with that when in college, when I felt like, I've always called myself this actress. This is who I've been my whole life. Who am I if I'm not calling myself that because I changed my major? And you can still call yourself that, and it can still be part of who you are, but just you're relating to it differently right now.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think one big reason that we all struggle so much with imposter syndrome and making those changes is our society just puts so much pressure on our jobs and career, right? It becomes
Totally.
our entire identity. And so, of course, when you major in one thing, you're like, you put yourself in that bucket, right? You almost like limit yourself in that way. Like when you're out and being social, people are like, what do you do? And then they put you in that bucket. And then if
Totally.
you totally make a change or you no longer do that thing, or you want to say you do something else, but maybe it's not your full time job. So you have that like feeling of dissonance. You
Absolutely.
feel that imposter syndrome because you're like, ooh, can I say that? Is that really what I am? But the fact of the matter is, for majority of us, I would say our job and career is just like what we do. It's not who we are, But I think our society does feed us this narrative that, oh no, that's who you are. Like you're an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer or author or like whatever,
Totally.
So I found that really interesting. And interesting Alex Cooper too. I had no idea. And I
Yeah.
also had this thought that I have heard a lot of very people who I see as very successful and famous vocalize that they too have imposter syndrome. So it's not just people who are like just starting out or maybe like lower on the totem pole who feel it. I think everyone feels that sense of imposter syndrome.
I think so too. And I think like even if someone's like, oh, you're an author, it's it's like I'm like,
You
I'm
are. You wear that badge loud and proud.
thank you. I yes. But no, really, I feel like I'm fully just like a creator. Like I love art. I love creating. I love putting together musical cabarets and like being in shows and then creating with my clients on how to guide them through a hard time or creating on a podcast or create like I really believe like that's something that I feel really connected to. So as you said, like it's sort of like we've used and I think we also use labels as a way of someone to getting to know us more. So it's like, oh, if I tell somebody I'm an actress, it's not really, maybe I'm not actively acting right now, but this is like a part of my spirit or my soul. And so I wonder with people who are in jobs that they don't like, how that feels to be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. And then inside being like, but I really want to be doing something else, or I really feel connected to something else. And this person is seeing me in this box.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I think it's just we're constantly trying to figure out who we are and allowing space to change. And for you to, maybe your full-time job right now is not podcast host, but you love it. You're a
Mhm.
podcast host. This is what you're doing.
I was just gonna say, like, when people are like, "So what do you do?"
Yeah.
Immediately, I wanna be like, I feel like I have to say my 9 to 5 full-time job, like, my means of paying rent right now, but what I
Right.
really wanna say, like, where 99% of my headspace is and energy and passion lie is in this
Yeah.
podcast, is in growing this community, and so it's funny that I feel like I have to say my main 9 to 5 right now, but like you just said, in my soul, I wanna say I'm a
Yeah.
podcaster, and it's just so funny because I almost would feel this sense of imposter syndrome if I said, "Oh, I'm a podcaster," but then I didn't also tack on, "Oh, but I also, like, work at a hedge fund right now," but that's minor
Yeah.
details.
But then you also feel like you have to like excuse it because it's not Alex Cooper's podcast right now, which I don't,
Yeah,
right? You're not, but like you don't have to make excuses either. And so I think
right.
it's like, this is what I'm doing and I'm connected and I'm feeling good.
Yeah,
And
and probably if like, let's say Alex Cooper's is the number 1 podcast in the world, I don't even know whose is right now, but, like, probably that number 2 podcast, maybe they even still feel that sense of imposter syndrome because they're not number 1, and it's just so
yeah.
interesting that it's like, there's always gonna be someone that we, like, compare ourselves to and question whether we're, like, good enough, you know?
Yeah. And I think if you're fully connected and you're enjoying what you're doing at the end of the day, and I think this goes back to even like my book of like, I wasn't writing to write a book, frankly. It was really like I've been through this in my 20s and 30s. There was a gap in literature. I felt like I had the knowledge and the education and the tools to be able to put something together that could be a resource for people
Mm,
in an accessible way if you couldn't afford therapy, also in a way that was very inclusive. There are not a lot of inclusive books out there.
yeah,
So any person that could be reading this book will see themselves in some character, whether it's your race, whether it's your culture, whether it's you didn't decide to go to college. There's a person in there that will highlight a part of your story that you're living through right now. And for me personally, I think that was the goal for me was like I wanted people to connect and find connection and feeling not alone through a resource, through a tool that was not out there currently. And I don't ever really talk about my book even with my clients. I don't even know if some of them know I have one. If they Google me, maybe they found it. Because it's not, to me, it's not about that. It's really just about, hey, I'm struggling and I Google turbulent transitional 20s. You'll find my book and it will help you. And so I think just staying aligned to the goal of your creation, and then again being open, letting it go. And for you with podcasting, it's like this is why I'm doing it because I'm enjoying it, and then letting that lead you to wherever you will go next.
yeah, coming back to your why
Mm-hmm.
and coming back to that authenticity and your purpose, I so agree. It totally makes all those other feelings wash away kind of, you know? So yeah,
Absolutely.
beautifully
Yeah.
said. Last question for you. What
Yeah.
advice would you give your 20-something younger self looking back?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. What advice? I think I probably say this a lot in my book, but leaning into imperfection and the mantra of you are right where you need to be. You are right where you need to be. I've said this so many times. And what does that mean? It means that wherever you are, however you're struggling, whatever's going on in your life, health complications, family conflict, anxiety, stress, navigating a new career, not liking your career, hating your relationship, loving your relationship, not knowing where it's going, you're right where you need to be.
Mm.
So stay in that. And if you can really lean into that fully emotionally, physically, I think that you can start to feel a sense of presence and a sense of safety. And I think what we're all looking for at the end of the day is feeling safe in where we're at in our journeys emotionally and through transition and through change. And so, this mantra, this tool, this book, if anything, I want it to help you to feel safe where you're at with who you are, right where you need to be.
I just got chills. That was so well said. Jennifer, thank you so much. This was so much fun. I absolutely loved everything that we covered. And I want to just give you a quick chance to, again, share where people can follow you, maybe get your book if this spoke to them.
Absolutely. Okay, so I am Therapy with Jennifer Lee on Instagram. So Therapy with Jennifer Leigh on Instagram. If you're listening, I'm terrible at social media. I should get better. There might be, I would say, like a new thing coming, an announcement in the next year. So if you follow me, stay tuned. But besides that, I'm based in Chicago and always happy to answer emails, questions. If you found this podcast helpful, you can find my book on Amazon. It is called I Love Me More by Jennifer Corin. And that's about it.
Awesome. And I will link all of that in the show notes as well if you're interested. Jennifer, thank you so much. This was
Thank
so
you.
incredible. And I had so much fun. I can't even believe we were talking for an hour. But thank you again for taking the time. I had such a great
Of
time.
course, I had the best time. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Too.